Hello, my name's Tom Reilly. I'm the chairman of the Business Services Group at Gross McGinley. And with me today is Jesse Kaczinski, one of our attorneys who's been working with us on unraveling what the Corporate Transparency Act is and what it means to our business clients. First of all, the most significant thing generally about the Corporate Transparency Act, it is the very first piece of federal legislation designed to regulate business entities. Now, today when we talk about business entities, we're talking about corporations, we're talking about limited liability companies, we're talking about limited partnerships. For purposes of shorthand, we're going to use the term business entity. Prior to this new law that went into effect on January 1st of 2024, corporations were controlled and business entities were controlled entirely by state law. This is the federal government's first purview into gathering, keeping, and requiring filings by business entities regardless of what state they are formed in. So, Jesse, why don't we start off by talking about which types of business entities need to file under the Corporate Transparency Act?
So, Tom, as you said, limited liability companies, corporations, LLPs, which are limited liability partnerships, and limited partnerships all will need to file. Basically, any entity that files with the Secretary of State in order to be formed. However, large domestic entities do not need to be filed. Under this, it's basically any entity that has over 20 employees and grosses over $5 million.
And that's telling because the purpose behind this massive requirement of small businesses is the federal government's efforts to eliminate money laundering and fraud. And those are done generally through shell companies, companies that have one or a handful of owners, no employees, and carry on business under the business entity name in an effort to avoid various state and federal laws. So the purpose is a laudable one to minimize money laundering, minimize fraud, but it is placing an enormous burden on small businesses. Let's start with businesses that are going to be formed in 2024 and beyond. What do you need to do after you form your business entity?
So for businesses that are going to be formed between 2024 and January 1st of 2025, you have a 1-year period to file. This should also probably be done right at the filing and creation of your entity. After 2025, January 1st of 2025, you must file within 30 days of formation of a new entity.
So you file your business entity with the state you wish to be governed by, but your Corporate Transparency Act with the federal government.
Yes. As for existing companies already, there's a 1-year mark to file as of now, which means any existing entity is going to need to file by January 1st of 2025.
So then the big question is, how do you file?
Yes. So there is a form to file through the FinCEN government website, and you can either upload it after you fill out the PDF and upload it, or you can just fill it out online. It requires a decent amount of information about the individuals of the entity and the entity itself.
And it's important to note, FinCEN is actually the criminal division of the Department of Treasury.
Yeah.
So corporations are filing, business entities are filing with the fraud division of the Department of Treasury in an effort to establish that they are not fraudulent or illegal entities. A term that's used a lot in the information regarding the Corporate Transparency Act, and I know it's used several times in the application itself, is beneficial owner. What is a beneficial owner of a business entity?
A beneficial owner is basically going to be anyone who has direct or indirect control over the entity, as well as anyone who has over 25% ownership interest in the entity.
And those individuals, the names and other information about those individuals are required to be disclosed in the filing under the Corporate Transparency Act.
Correct. That's going to need to be disclosed, as well as for new entities, you're going to need to disclose who's creating the entity.
Whether it's a new entity that does its initial filing or an existing entity that files in 2025, the question is it one filing and done, or will you need to file at several different times during the life of the business entity?
So as of now, after your initial filing, you only need to file if there is a change in the entity within 30 days of that change. However, that might be changed eventually, where there's going to need to be periodic updates.
And what is a change in the entity?
A change in who a beneficial ownership interest is, a change in the address of someone, basically any personal information that changes of the beneficial owners or of the company itself.
So from the initial filing, anything that changes, beneficial ownership percentage, somebody who wasn't 25% or now is, that person moves and gets a new address. You need to do an updated filing within 30 days of the change.
Yes.
Now, this is obviously going to require a lot of work on the part of a lot of people. And I'm sure there's people that are saying, look, this is ridiculous. I'm just not going to do this. Probably not a good idea because, Jesse, what happens if you don't comply with the mandates of the Corporate Transparency Act?
There is a $500 fine for each day that you are violating, which can go up to $10,000. There's also a potential prison sentence.
And it's not an inconsequential prison sentence. Isn't it 2 years?
I believe so.
I want to call it a piece of paper. I might be dating myself, but this electronic filing that you need to do is something very important, something every small business entity is going to need to address in 2024 and likely again during its corporate history or business entity history going forward. I'm assuming the portal allows for individuals to file on behalf of their owned business entities?
Yes, so individuals can file on behalf of their own business entities, or you can have professional services such as Gross McGinley help you with your filing.
And I would point out to you something that we've become keenly aware of when anything changes is if you're watching this, is probably because you're trying to get information on what you need to do to comply with the Corporate Transparency Act, which is laudable. It is likely during the course of the year you may receive spam, you may receive phishing, you may receive Trojan horse emails with companies claiming to be a division of the federal government telling you they are sending you information about how to go in and fill out this form. While you can do it yourself, I suggest you locate the FinCEN website and go to the portal on your own. Do not click a link on anything you've received from a party alleging to be an agent of or a division of the Department of Treasury or any other federal government, because the government is not doing that. The burden is on you to file. Don't be fooled and release very, very personal information that probably shouldn't be out to the public to third parties who are trying to use this new requirement as a way to basically scam you. Ironic, because the whole purpose of the Corporate Transparency Act is to avoid scams. But in any event, is there anything else, Jesse, in closing, you think that people need to focus on as they make a decision on how they're going to do this and when they're going to do this? By way of example, is the website available now?
The website is available now. The form is available now. This is all available as of January 1st. We highly suggest you do it earlier and not wait until December of 2024 to get moving.
Well, thank you very much, Jesse. A lot of information in a short amount of time, and hopefully you know more now than you did when you started listening to us and watching us, learning about this new requirement, a federal requirement for business entities under the purview of something called the Corporate Transparency Act.